Great to have Ian Castleberry joining us here in just moments with the Wise Guys for our Major League update. Always looking forward to that. We got a few things to get to. Chris Smith joining us today in for our buddy Charlie Metcalf. Chris, as always, man, thanks for making this happen.
Oh, man, absolutely. We get to talk baseball here in a second with Ian Castleberry. That's going to be awesome. I could do that all day, Pat.
Me too, as a matter of fact. And speaking of, let's bring the aforementioned Ian on with us. Of course, great to have Ian, who writes for thecomeback.com, awfulannouncing.com. We always appreciate him playing with us. He knows what he's talking about. Ian, how you doing, lad?
Well, I'm blushing a little bit after Chris Smith. Nice comments there, I have to say. How you doing, Chris?
Doing well, Ian. Hope you are as well.
Yeah.
And, man, we got
sweating too much.
Yeah. Oh, my goodness. So good to have you, buddy. And first things first, Ian, let's talk about USA Baseball as they prepare to qualify for the Olympics. Are there any ex-major leaguers on the initial squad?
There are. USA Baseball, they have to play in the qualifying round coming up. On Memorial Day, they'll play against Nicaragua, and then the next 2 days, the Dominican Republic and Puerto Rico, and this is to qualify for the Olympic baseball tournament. But some familiar names on this roster, pitchers, Homer Bailey, who was very successful with the Cincinnati Reds, Edwin Jackson, who I'm not positive on this, but I think has pitched for every team in Major League Baseball. It certainly seems that way. And David Robertson, who was an outstanding closer for the Yankees and White Sox in recent years. Other familiar names, catcher Matt Wieters is on the roster, Todd Frazier, who just played last year, I believe, for the Texas Rangers or the Pittsburgh Pirates, but a good third baseman there. And then in the outfield, Matt Kemp and John Jay are some former major leaguers that are going to be on this roster, which is going to be managed by Mike Scioscia, who also, like some of the major leaguers on this roster, currently not finding employment in the major leagues. So I think USA Baseball has an opportunity to really boost up its roster. I'm surprised there's not more major leaguers on this team, to be honest, because, as we've seen over maybe the past 3-4 years, that mid-range veteran, somebody who's kind of in their 30s, early 30s, mid-30s, but teams don't want to pay salary for a guy when they think they can get similar production from a prospect instead. I'm surprised we don't see even more major leaguers on this USA Baseball squad.
Yeah, Ian, that's what I want to ask you about. Basically, it's the criteria is you can't be on a 40-man roster, and none of those guys that you mentioned are. And there are guys who've been out of the leagues, like Homer Bailey. I think was totally out of the league last year. But personally, I like seeing some of the younger guys. I like seeing Matthew Liberatore, who's a prospect in the Cardinals system, a top 50 prospect. I guess that's what the Futures game's for, though, if you want to see those guys. But it is an interesting mix. You've got guys like Anthony Goss, who was on a big league roster earlier this year and then was released. What do you think the right mix is? I mean, should they go with a more veteran team? Should they go with this mixture? I mean, it really is interesting because you look at the age range from Matthew Liberatore to Matt Kemp is probably a 20-year age difference.
Yeah,
so
Kemp could be his dad.
Yeah, what is the right mix?
Yeah, you bring up a good point. I think a mix of young and veteran is the way to go. Just loading up with a bunch of former major leaguers probably isn't the best way to go. I mean, this is a good way for young talent to develop, especially against international players, and face some competition that they wouldn't in the traditional minor league system. You mentioned Matthew Liberatore. He's somebody that's going to come up in one of our topics later in this segment. But I think depending on how, I haven't seen the rosters for the other teams, other countries participating in this tournament, because I'd hate to see a young team get beaten up by a really veteran team. Like, I don't know if Puerto Rico, for instance, is loading up on a bunch of Major League veterans. It would kind of remind me of what we saw with USA Basketball, where the United States sent a lot of good young players, but they'd run into Brazil with Oscar Schmidt, or some of the European teams that had professionals playing on their team, and they got crushed and forced USA Basketball to reevaluate how it puts together a team. But yeah, I think veterans and someone like Mike Scioscia with Major League experience leading a younger team, or at least a mix, is probably the best way to go.
Ian Castleberry playing with the wise guys. Yeah, what exactly is the obviously with college and pro players for the the basketball end of it, but I haven't really paid much attention. Is it like anything goes, college and ex-pro players? If that's the only thing, that's, in other words, if you're not on a 40-man roster, if that's it, it seems like it's wide open, where the Olympics never was. Remember, it was always about amateurs. I mean, then we started getting our AWS kicked in basketball, and we said, you know what, we're not going to take this anymore. It was kind of like, we're going to show you. But baseball, we haven't really necessarily seen that. But we're not even. Japan says they're moving forward with the summer games, and I'm not sure what their COVID situation is over there. But we're talking 80 to 100,000 people in that main stadium, and I know some countries are a little nervous about that. We'll see where it goes. Ian, I wanted to get something on Tony La Russa. And I just want to ask you a quick question on this guy. Bleacher Report has a headline, and he's really been getting a lot of guff lately, and it kind of understandably so, making questionable moves. And the headline is, La Russa is still managing like it's 1989. He's 76. He'd been out of the game for a decade. And again, we brought this up on our show. I mean, is it fair that La Russa is getting beaten around the way he is? Because if I remember correctly, the Sox are actually holding up pretty well this year.
I think it's fair to criticize him for maybe seeming a little bit out of touch or managing like it's 1989. I think that refers to the fact that over the weekend against the Yankees, he didn't bring in Liam Hendricks for a situation where he would have had to get 4 outs rather than just pitching the 9th inning. I think he, traditionally has stuck to the 9th inning. When he had Dennis Eckersley, especially in Oakland, but we see more often now. Maybe not as much in the regular season as the postseason that, managers are willing to bring in their top closer, to get 4 outs, 5 outs, if it means facing the best hitters in the opposing lineup. But I do think that detractors and people in the media and fans were kind of waiting ever since Tony La Russa was hired by the White Sox, because that just seemed like such a baffling hire out of left field, if you will. I think a lot of people have been waiting for the moment when Tony La Russa would look like this out-of-touch codger in the White Sox dugout. So when something like this happens, or what we saw last week with him criticizing Yermin Mercedes for breaking unwritten rules in baseball, people were ready to pounce, and boy, they sure did.
What's your take on this, Mr. Smith?
I didn't like the hire when it happened. I mean, you got a lot of really young talent there, and Eloy Jimenez, Luis Robert, and Juan Moncada, Mercedes, like you just mentioned, in a really team that it is primed and ready to go. I thought it was an unusual hire. It got out to a rocky start when the DUI stuff came out. He's just, you talk about the old school thing. He is as old school gets, and I just don't think it was going to be a good rub with these players. Yeah, he knows the game. Gosh, yes, respect to everything that he did, Hall of Famer and all that. But it seems like every single day, Ian's right. People are waiting to pounce. People are criticizing something he did. You didn't put the reliever in this time, or you did put the reliever in this time, or you didn't, pinch hit for this guy here. People are going to look. It just seemed like a recipe for disaster from the get-go. That said, this time last week, they had the best record in baseball.
They're 26-19. Yeah. They lead the division.
Yeah. I mean, they've got talent galore. They've been banged up a lot. Robert is out. Jimenez is out. Both of them are saying they're going to come back sooner than later. But, Ian, I just did not like this hire from the get-go.
It was baffling. An exciting young team. I understand maybe wanting a little veteran leadership after taking a chance with Rick Renteria. But this did seem from the very beginning like Jerry Reinsdorf doing his old buddy a favor in hiring Tony La Russa. There are plenty of other good managers who don't necessarily have to be, the analytics guys who have more old school methods that the White Sox could have hired. Maybe it'll end up all working out. It might even end up working out in spite of Tony La Russa. Like maybe he's kicked off his own clubhouse so much that they're just going to play, just to show up Tony La Russa that, you can break the unwritten rules and so forth. What bothers me the most about this, I know we got to get going, but
you're good.
We're talking about this over the past week, Tony La Russa and unwritten rules, when we have guys like Shohei Ohtani, who that guy is must-see baseball right now. He leads the major leagues in home runs. He's got, I think, a 2.37 ERA, a two-way player, the likes of which we just have not seen in the game. in almost 100 years. And we should be talking more about the players and who's really having a good season rather than whether or not Tony La Russa is being a curmudgeon.
Yeah, but it's more fun to talk about the old man than it is, but I hear you on that one. You know what? We will get around to that. One team that's actually doing very well right now, the Tampa Bay Rays, are riding a 10-game winning streak. They were 19-19 when this streak began. Now they're tied with the Red Sox for first place in the American League East. The Yanks just a half a game out. The Blue Jays 4.5 games out. The Orioles, hold on. Let's see. Hold on. Still going down. Oh, there's Baltimore. Yeah, right there. They're deep in the cellar. But here it is. When the Rays were with, when Joe Madden was with the Rays, we're like, wow, this is Joe Madden. Joe Madden, look what he's doing with this team. But Joe Madden leaves, and the Rays still continue their success. I mean, how is it this organization, Ian, is able to accomplish a lot with not much to work with?
Yeah, Kevin Cash, I think you can make an argument that maybe he's even better at doing this than Joe Madden is, because Joe Madden could get a little wacky and seemingly wanting to kind of impose his personality on the game. But the Rays, it's talent evaluation. They consistently win the trade. They trade Chris Archer to the Pirates, and they get Tyler Glasnow and Austin Meadows, two major contributors, back in return. Chris mentioned Matthew Liberatore. He was a key part of the deal, going to St. Louis in a deal that brought back Randy Arozarena, who was a postseason star last year, playing really well this year. They traded Blake Snell to the San Diego Padres. They get back Francisco Mejia, who could be the catcher of the future, who's been viewed that way for several organizations, and I think he's finally going to break out with the Tampa Bay Rays. So they trade guys before they get too expensive. They make sure they get maximum return for them, and they don't overpay for certain stats. So even for years, even before the Tampa Bay Rays were on this run of success, they didn't overpay for saves, for instance. They thought it was kind of an overrated stat. You can find guys who can get 3 outs in the 9th inning, whether or not they're, fireballers or maybe they're converted former starters who can get 3 outs, and, they're not paying $10 million or whatever for a Craig Kimbrell, but they have somebody who can be effective and get outs. And I think you see that in the lineup as well. Tampa Bay consistently getting guys who can play. Maybe they don't put up the big numbers, but Kevin Cash is good at creating the matchups. This guy bats better against left-handed pitching. This guy's better in certain matchups, and I think we see that throughout the Tampa Bay Rays roster.
Chris Smith, go on this one.
Their front office is unbelievable. They are dealt with the constraints of the salary cap that they have, from ownership, but they know other teams' players better than those other teams know them. And if you get down to the analytics or the psychological breakdowns that they do in their front office, those people behind the scenes, and I'm talking about young people that are coming up in the game that are very bright, like Bill Ballew's son Bryce, or I'm sorry, Brad. Brad's working in Tampa now and in player development, and that kid is really bright and he's going to do big things in the game. And you just hear about some of the things they're doing that they're doing and other people aren't, and just how they understand things. And, they know how, when a guy comes up to pinch hit in the bottom of the 9th with runners at second and third, how he feels and what's going through his mind. We can all look at the statistics and see, guy did this pinch hitting, or this guy did this in, RBI situations with less than 2 outs or whatever, but they know how that guy's thinking mentally. It's really amazing, some of the things they're doing, and those people just do not get enough credit. I know they got criticized last year when pulled Blake Snell early, and that, but that's something that they'd been doing, and Blake Snell hadn't gone that far, and he was cruising that night. And I was sitting there scratching my head as well, but that's what their stuff told them to do, and more times than not, it's right, Ian. And they're winning again today, and I think if they win right now and they're in the 11th, that's 11 in a row. So they're obviously doing something right.
Yeah.
I felt the same way in the World Series. It seemed crazy to pull Blake Snell, but Kevin Cash, and he was candid about this. This is what we've done all season. This is what the numbers said. And I know some people are screaming, sometimes you don't have to pay so much attention to analytics, read the game, but they have a game plan that they follow, and I don't know how you can argue against success at this point.
We are joined by Ian Castleberry on the D.C. Creasman Jewelers Wise Lines. Thanks to Mike Lawrence and the gang at Happy Hill Restaurant for bringing us Ian today. Good to have you with us, man. One more question. The Dodgers sweep the upstart Giants. And, despite being swept by its heated rival, Ian, I know this is a setback, and there was not much expected from this Giants team. But what you're seeing so far is this a team that could be in it for the long haul this season?
The Giants have been a huge surprise. Their roster is full of names you wouldn't recognize. I think other than the Minnesota Twins playing terribly, the success of the San Francisco Giants is one of the biggest surprises of this season. Now, it's not all Buster Posey, but I think that is one of the recognizable names, and he's playing great, batting .355, OPS over 1,000. He was missing from the lineup last season because he sat out because of COVID and injuries in previous seasons, but they're getting great production out of their best players. Brandon Crawford has 11 home runs. Donovan Solano batting .313. Brandon Belt also getting on base, drawing walks. Mike Yastrzemski continues to be a surprise. Also, they have gotten outstanding starting pitching, and that might be the biggest reason for their success. They signed Kevin Gausman. He's got a 1.66 ERA this season in 9 starts. Anthony DeScafani, a 3.54 ERA. Alex Wood, a 1.93 ERA. Johnny Cueto also pitching well. And they haven't gotten great relief pitching. Their bullpen has actually probably been their weak spot. So that makes me wonder if the Giants can actually be even better if you think, they've hit their ceiling. Well, if they pitch better out of the bullpen and maybe add a bat at the trade deadline, we'll see where the Giants are when it comes to late July. This is a team, I think, I still think the Dodgers are going to win the NL West, and the Padres will also be in the wild card. But with what we see elsewhere in the National League, especially the NL Central, with really the Cardinals, the only team that seem to be playing consistently well, I think there's a path for the Giants to make it to the postseason.
All right, man. My Giants fans out in Northern California going to love to hear that, Ian Castleberry. Hey, buddy, we appreciate you. Great chatter, as always. Appreciate you, my friend. Be well.
All right, thanks, guys. See you, Chris.
All right, Ian.
All right, there you have it. One of the good ones, man. Ian Castleberry.